The Young and the Restless spoilers. The Dark Secret of Audra, a reimagined revelation. Los Angeles had always been a city of reinvention, a place where people buried their pasts under layers of ambition, and where truth was something you bought, sold, or erased. For Audra Charles, that city was not just a memory, it was a graveyard. Beneath the glamorous boardrooms and smoky jazz lounges lay the wreckage of her choices, the scars of a life built on deception. When she arrived in Genoa City, Audra had crafted a new self, polished, confident, ruthless, untouchable. She moved through the corridors of Newman Media like someone who had already conquered her demons. But the thing about demons is that they don't stay buried forever. And when Holden entered the picture, the past came crawling back with a vengeance. Holden's arrival was like a storm that no one saw coming. He wasn't just another smooth talker or business opportunist. He carried an energy that unsettled everyone who crossed his path, a quiet danger, an arrogance sharpened by knowledge. The moment his eyes met Audra's, the air changed. There was recognition there, the kind that can only come from two people who once shared something toxic, something intimate, and something criminal. To the untrained eye, it looked like unfinished romance. But for Audra, it was something far worse, unfinished business. Their connection had been whispered about for months. Rumors suggested that in Los Angeles, the two had been partners in something more than love, a series of financial scams, corporate espionage, or perhaps something even darker. But the truth, when it finally surfaced, was a delicate monster, a blend of love, betrayal, survival, and moral decay. And it began with a theft. Years ago, Audra had worked at the Shadow Room, an elite members-only club in downtown LA, where the city's wealthiest and most corrupt crossed paths under the illusion of exclusivity. It wasn't a nightclub, it was a marketplace for secrets. Deals were made there that could change stock markets, ruin marriages, or topple empires. Audra wasn't just a bystander. She was the connector, the one who knew everyone's weakness and learned how to profit from it. But the game turned dangerous when she stole $500,000 from a client, a man whose wealth came not from business but from blood. Holden had warned her not to do it. He had been part of that world too, charming his way through men who believed their power made them invincible. Together, they had built an empire of manipulation, feeding off others' greed. But when Audra went rogue and stole the money, everything spiraled. The man she stole from was not just a victim, he was connected, politically, criminally, lethally. He came for her, and in that moment of desperation, Holden made a choice that would define both of them. He covered for her. He took the blame, forged evidence, bribed witnesses, and made the man believe that he, not Audra, had taken the money. The situation ended with blood, silence, and exile. Los Angeles was no longer safe for either of them. When Holden confessed this truth in Genoa City, it should have been cathartic. But instead, it revealed something hollow, not in the writing of the story, but in the hearts of the people involved. The true crime was not the theft. It was the way they had built their lives afterward, pretending it never happened. Audra had carried that secret into every boardroom and every relationship. Holden had turned it into a weapon, leveraged to control her, to remind her that she owed him everything. In Genoa City, Audra had clawed her way up the corporate ladder with Victor Newman's backing. She had manipulated Kyle Abbott, seduced alliances, played Claire against Summer, and orchestrated small wars of loyalty. Every move was designed to solidify her place in a world that valued power above morality. But Holden's return shattered the illusion. He didn't come back for revenge. He came back because he wanted something else, control, recognition, and, perhaps, the thrill of watching her squirm. Holden's confession to Claire wasn't a moment of redemption, it was a calculated performance. He knew what he was doing. He wanted to test how far he could push Audra before she broke. And Claire, caught in the middle, became the audience to a spectacle of deceit. She thought she was hearing a confession of loyalty, that Holden had once protected a woman out of love. But what she was really hearing was a declaration of ownership. Holden didn't protect Audra because he cared for her. He protected her because she was his creation. Everything she had become was, in some way, an extension of his influence. The disappointment of the fans came from the simplicity of the confession, a theft, a cover-up, a protection. But what most failed to see was that the real crime was psychological. Audra's theft of money was merely symbolic. What she truly stole was agency, from Holden, from the men she manipulated, and from herself. She had become a machine programmed by trauma, ambition, and survival. The Shadow Room incident wasn't just a moment of greed, it was the turning point where she realized she could never return to who she once was. In Los Angeles, she had been the survivor. In Genoa City, she became the predator. And yet, when Holden stood before her, the old dynamic returned. Suddenly, she wasn't the powerful executive, she was the woman with a secret, the woman who owed him her freedom. That power imbalance, that invisible leash, was the true consequence of their shared past. And Holden used it with precision. Every conversation, every glance, every unspoken threat reminded her of the night everything fell apart in LA. But Holden's mistake, and Audra's salvation, lay in underestimating each other. He believed she was still the same woman he once controlled, still ruled by guilt and gratitude. He didn't realize that she had learned from him, learned how to manipulate, how to lie, how to control the narrative. When she finally decided to expose him, she did it not through confession but through strategy. Quietly, she began leaking parts of their story to Victor, twisting details, creating an illusion that Holden was the real thief, that he had used her to cover his own criminal debts. By the time Holden realized what she was doing, his image had already begun to fracture. The fans' disappointment with the simplicity of the confession may have been premature. Because in Genoa City, nothing ever ends where it begins. The Shadow Room was never just a place. It was a metaphor, a dark mirror of the city itself, a place where everyone's truth was for sale. And if Holden's confession seemed small, it was only because the bigger secret hadn't yet been revealed. There were other files, other deals, other victims tied to that night. $500,000 may have been stolen, but somewhere in Los Angeles, a man had died. And that death, the one Holden never mentioned, might be the secret that finally brings both him and Audra down. Audra's dark secret, therefore, is not just about money. It's about complicity, survival, and the blurry line between victim and villain. It's about the woman who learned to weaponize her trauma, and the man who believed he could still control her. It's about how both of them carried the sins of Los Angeles into the polished chaos of Genoa City, and how, no matter how far they run, the past always finds a way back. And perhaps that's the lesson fans will come to see in time, that in the young and the restless, the true shocks don't come from the crimes we expect, but from the people who commit them, and the terrible realization that sometimes, we've been rooting for the wrong one all along. Holden's lie, the secret beneath the secret. For a moment, it seemed like the storm had passed. Holden's confession in Los Angeles, the revelation that Audra had stolen $500,000 from a client at the Shadow Room and that he had covered it up, had silenced the speculation. The truth, though smaller than fans had imagined, was supposed to bring closure. But closure has never existed in Genoa City. In this world, every truth is just another disguise, every confession another manipulation. And now, fans, and the characters themselves, are beginning to realize that Holden's version of events might have been a story crafted for convenience, not truth. The reaction across the fandom was visceral. On social media and fan forums, outrage burned hotter than any scandal. It's terrible. Makes no sense. Either Holden's lying, or the writers think we're idiots who forgot all those intense exchanges between Audra and Holden in Genoa City, not to mention Tucker's involvement, one viewer snapped. The frustration was not just about disappointment, it was about inconsistency. Audra and Holden had shared a kind of volatile chemistry that spoke of darker history than just a shared crime. Their every glance, every argument, every unspoken word suggested the presence of a wound deeper than money. If the writers expected audiences to believe the Shadow Room theft was the full story, they had underestimated how closely people have been watching. But as often happens on the young and the restless, what appears to be a narrative misstep may actually be the beginning of something bigger. Some fans, instead of rage, chose suspicion. "I think he's downplaying what really happened," one post read. "He's protecting himself and her. Holden didn't tell Claire everything." Another fan echoed the same thought, "That story was too neat, too rehearsed. There's no way that's all there is. Whatever they did, it's worse, something they can't let anyone find out." And then came the teaser that changed everything. In the short preview clip released for next week's episodes, Holden and Audra are seen in a heated argument, their faces close, their voices trembling with panic. "I didn't tell Claire everything," Holden admits, his tone shifting from arrogance to fear. What follows is more haunting. His implication that their shared secret is darker than anyone imagines, something so terrible that neither of them can afford to let it surface. In that moment, it becomes clear, the story of Los Angeles isn't over. It's barely begun. If Holden's confession was a cover, then what was he hiding? The theft could have been a decoy, a convenient half-truth to divert suspicion from something far worse. The tone of his argument with Audra suggested guilt not for lying, but for omission. The kind of omission that protects not reputation, but survival. Suddenly, the bland story of a stolen fortune starts to look like the tip of an iceberg made of fear, betrayal, and perhaps blood. When Holden first arrived in Genoa City, his demeanor was that of a man in control, charming, poised, but with an undercurrent of danger. He and Audra spoke in riddles, fought with the intimacy of two people who had shared both a bed and a crime. He mentioned debts that couldn't be repaid, promises that couldn't be broken. Audra, for her part, was defensive, reactive, her calm cracking each time Holden pushed too far. Their tension wasn't just romantic, it was survivalist. Two people bound by something that could destroy them both if even one spoke out of turn. That kind of connection doesn't grow from theft. It grows from trauma. Tucker McCall's name, once a distant echo, suddenly becomes relevant again. Audra's rise in Genoa City has always been tied to Tucker's manipulation. He saw something in her, a mix of intelligence and desperation, and he used it. Holden's mention of Tucker during his first weeks in town was no accident. Fans recall the sharpness in his tone when Tucker's name came up, the flicker of recognition that passed between them. It's possible that whatever happened in Los Angeles didn't just involve Audra and Holden, but Tucker too, a triad of corruption buried under a web of secrets and corporate deceit. The shadow room, the theft, the cover-up, they may all connect to something far more criminal. Some have begun to speculate that the man Audra stole from wasn't a stranger. What if the $500,000 weren't his to begin with? What if it was a bribe, a payment gone wrong, or hush money meant to keep someone quiet after a death, or worse, a disappearance? The pieces start to align in ways that the official story doesn't explain. The fear in Holden's eyes, the panic in Audra's voice, the way both react to the word truth, all of it points to something much heavier than a stolen check. For Holden, the facade of control is starting to crumble. His relationship with Claire, the one part of his new life that seemed genuine, now hangs by a thread. Claire believed his confession, felt sympathy, even compassion for his willingness to protect Audra once upon a time. But when she sees the new clip, when she hears him say, "I didn't tell you everything," the ground beneath her collapses. Trust, once broken, cannot be reassembled with words. Holden may have thought he could keep his new life intact by feeding a diluted version of the truth. But in Genoa City, the truth always bleeds through. For Audra, the consequences are even greater. She has built her entire career on power, not the kind that comes from position, but the kind that comes from fear. She knows how to manipulate, how to seduce, how to spin narratives. But this time, the lie is too big to control. The more she insists that Holden's confession was the whole story, the more people begin to doubt her. Victor watches her closely now, suspicious of her distracted behavior. Kyle senses she's hiding something. Even Tucker, who once trusted her implicitly, now treats her like a liability. In her efforts to bury the past, Audra may have unearthed something that will bury her instead. And Holden, for all his arrogance, seems terrified. His remark to Audra in that preview clip wasn't just about guilt. It was about fear. Fear of exposure, yes, but also fear of consequence. There's a tremor in his voice when he says that the secret they share could destroy both of them. It's the kind of fear that doesn't come from legal trouble. It comes from knowing that if the wrong people find out the truth, death might follow. Whatever happened in Los Angeles, whatever Holden and Audra did, it wasn't just theft. It was something that changed who they were, something they can never undo. This new revelation sets the stage for a darker arc, one that could restore the depth fans have been waiting for. If the writers are playing the long game, the initial disappointment may have been intentional, a smokescreen before the real twist. Perhaps Holden's confession was never meant to satisfy. It was meant to mislead. To make the audience underestimate the danger until the next revelation lands like a bomb. Speculation is already mounting. Was someone killed in Los Angeles? Did Holden and Audra cover up a death, maybe an accident, maybe not? Did Tucker orchestrate it, using them both as pawns in a game of corporate blackmail? Or was the man from the shadow room not a victim, but a co-conspirator silenced before he could expose them? The answers remain buried, but the clues point towards something catastrophic, a shared sin that explains the terror behind Holden's eyes, the guilt behind Audra's poise. For now, both characters are walking on a razor's edge. Holden's relationship with Claire is the only thing anchoring him to decency, but that tether is fraying fast. Audra's career, already fragile, teeters between exposure and annihilation. If the truth comes out, it won't just end their partnership, it will end their freedom. And in true Young and the Restless fashion, it will probably end someone's life. So, is the story of Holden and Audra over? Not even close. What fans once dismissed as anticlimactic may yet become one of the show's most haunting storylines. A slow burn of guilt, deceit, and the high price of survival. The next confession won't be about money. It will be about something much worse. Something buried under Los Angeles concrete, still waiting to be uncovered. When that truth finally surfaces, Genoa City won't just be shocked, it will never be the same again.